Welcome to Community Focus. I'm Breanne Loving. Now, normally at the beginning of every episode, I start out with a personal story, and that usually leads into a quick soundbite that introduces the show. But this week's episode is a very special one because I feature Oklahoma Congressman Tom Cole. Now, I won't waste any time with the story, so I'll let you hear the soundbite and we'll get right into the show. I was very fortunate because he sat down with me in the studio to discuss a little bit about his background and so much more.
I wish I could tell you it was well planned and well thought out, but of course it wasn't. I mean, God opens doors at different points and you just walk through them.
So stay tuned for part 1 of my episode with Congressman Tom Cole. All of this and more right here on Community Focus. Serving the 4th District of Oklahoma, Congressman Tom Cole is an advocate for the people of Oklahoma. He's made a name for himself in Congress with proposed legislation upholding values that are important to many Americans. A very honored guest. Congressman Tom Cole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Well, tell us briefly about your background and how you arrived serving the 4th District of Oklahoma in Washington, D.C.
Well, I certainly never intended to be in politics. I have a doctorate in history, and I thought I would be a college professor and worked a lot that way, but got involved in campaigns really through my mom. My mom had run for office. She'd been a very active local Republican, lost her first race when I was a graduate student at OU. Worst place on the planet to be is your mother's watch party the night you lose and you haven't done much. I think the guilt was overwhelming. So I promised her that night if she'd run again, I'd learn how to do this. Because I could tell that she was a really good candidate, but she spent too much time trying to run her own race. She needed somebody else to do that. I never thought she'd run, and then 14 months later, I was on a Fulbright fellowship in London. She called and said, "Hey, I'm running. When are you coming home?" And so I was coming back and took time off from my studies and ran a race, and that time she won, again, because she was a great candidate. So I got fascinated by this stuff, just started running campaigns for fun while I was finishing my dissertation. And eventually got a job offer to, hey, why don't you take a year out of your academic life and come be the executive director of the Oklahoma Republican Party? And back then, nobody wanted to do that. And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And I did. And then I really never went back. There was a succession of political jobs after that. I was worked in a governor's race, worked for a congressman, became Republican state party chairman for 4 years, went to the state Senate, set up a business with a couple of partners that still exists that runs campaigns not just in Oklahoma but all across the country. Got an offer when I was a state senator to go to Washington and run the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. I did that for a couple of years, came home, ran Keating's race and our good mutual acquaintance J.C. Watt's race, and a number of others as their top consultant. Then became Secretary of State in Oklahoma for 4 years, and then went back to D.C. to run be chief of staff of the Republican National Committee in the 2000 election cycle when George W. Bush won. And we took both houses, first time in 48 years we'd done that. And then finally, I was splitting time between Washington and Oklahoma. My business was both up there and down here. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, my great friend J.C. Watts says he's not going to run again. And calls me up, says, you got to come and you've got to run. And it was just a few weeks before filing in 2002, and I looked around, and this was still a very competitive district politically, and J.C., honestly, is a much better candidate than I ever dreamed about being. And so I thought, but I think I can hold it, and I didn't believe anybody else could. So I took a shot, got lucky, and won, and have enjoyed it ever since.
What a journey.
It's, mostly accidental. I wish I could tell you it was well planned and well thought out, but of course it wasn't. I mean, God opens doors at different points, and you just walk through them.
And you've worn many hats.
Well, yeah, this is a classic, a jack of all trades, master of none. But I enjoy the diversity of it, and it's every step has been a delight. I've been very fortunate, worked with some really terrific people.
Well, a lot is going on in Congress right now, and a lot that your office is particularly involved in. What are some of your legislative initiatives that have passed recently?
Well, we're always working on defense initiatives. It's a very heavy defense district with Fort Sill at one end of the district, Tinker Air Force at the other. So, frankly, saving 7 AWACS planes that were proposed to be cut. There's only 31 in the Air Force, and 27 were stationed at Tinker. So saving those 7 planes was a big deal. We've worked a lot on Indian affairs. This is a district with 11 different Indian tribes. I'm a tribal member myself, a very proud Chickasaw. So over the last few years, we've been able to increase federal funding for Indian health care by almost 40%. It's actually been an area we've worked pretty closely with the president. The president has an excellent record on Native American issues. And so he quite often reaches out to me on those and says, I need you to be my Republican counterpart on this, because most Indian things are bipartisan. So we've done those things. I sit on the budget committee and have helped Paul Ryan craft 4 budgets that have passed, and now Tom Price, his replacement. And those are very significant budget committee. And then I'm always involved in just the process of what moves across the floor. I sit on the Rules Committee as well, and that's the smallest committee in Congress, only 13 members. And every bill that's controversial has to have a rule attached to it. That limits the amount of debate, what points of order are relevant, if any, what amendments are allowed. So it's very important from the majority standpoint that you set it up in a way that you're going to be able to pass it. So that means almost anything that comes across the floor has come in front of a committee I sat on, and we've played some role in shaping the battlefield, if you will, of legislation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk about, because we're here in the Lawton-Fort Sill area, National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. How does that affect our military personnel with regard to operations and readiness?
It's tremendously important. First of all, everything that, every penny we spent has to be, quote, authorized, and that's what this is. So how much are you going to spend on the PIM program, which would be the Paladin Integrated Management Program, which is upgrading the cannons at Fort Sill. What sort of monies is going to be devoted to training, which would be like, again, our infantry school here at Fort Sill. So every single decision is made in that bill. And it's passed both houses. It's reached the president's desk. The president has threatened to veto it. The differences really aren't too much in the defense area. Both the president and the Republican House and Senate have appropriated almost exactly the same amount of money, and mostly in the same ways. The dispute is the president wants to raise domestic spending in other areas, and so he would like to use defense, if you will, as a bargaining chip. There's also a dispute over how the money is spent. The president wants it in the baseline, which actually I would agree with if we can get there. That's a preferable way to do it. We plussed up, as it's called, or added more money to the Overseas Operations Contingency Account, OCO money as it's called, and the president would prefer that be different. But frankly, I would argue for a $600 billion plus defense bill, we're pretty close. This shouldn't be vetoed. This is much more about domestic spending and increasing that than it is about profound differences over what we do in the military.
And you can learn more about Congressman Tom Cole at cole.house.gov. And don't forget to stay tuned for part 2 of my episode with him, which will air next week at the same time. Well, it looks like it's about that time. So hey, thanks for joining me on Community Focus, right here on KCCU.